Yo everyone. I and some other partners recently got invited to a staff test to try out the new reinforcement overhaul for SCP-SL. Because of how the branch we played on was built, we're only permitted to talk about certain parts of the reinforcement overhaul and a little bit about the guns refactor, as everything was still sort of subject to change. Even though this was a really early build, these features are still planned to be added into the 14.0 beta, which should be happening later this month, as the devs have said it's going to be happening in a few weeks. This video is going to be my mostly unscripted thoughts about the test, so let me know what you think. And without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start off with the new player selection mechanic, and I'm going to be honest, I got quite burnt on it. So there was this situation, right, where I was a scientist, and I died pretty early into the round.
Yo, Larry, you seeing this? Goddamn, am I right? Oh, fuck!
So then 3 minutes later, I spawned back in as an MTF private, and you know, that shows that it is working. It's working pretty well, in fact. So then I go down into the facility, we fight SCP-939, and I get killed, I believe, as the third person in my squad. So then, like, maybe a minute later, a mini-wave happens with 6 people in it, and I just don't get to come back. So then I had to wait for around 4.5 minutes, and that was to spawn back in as Chaos. Which, granted, it's a good thing that I spawned at all, but it does kind of suck the fact that, you know, I could have spawned back in as my team in a mini-wave, but I had to wait even longer just to spawn in as the other team. I guess the problem I have with it, this new player selection mechanic, is that you kind of have the feeling of missing out on a spawn, especially like a mini wave. If that happens, you just kind of feel like you're missing out. Like, why didn't I spawn in? You know, I feel like I should have been there. But yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, from my experience, it seems like if you get killed right before or after respawn, you get kind of fucked over. It could be possible that I had bad luck, mind you, because in one round I died, and literally like 10 seconds later I came back in a mini wave for my team. So it really is just still luck based, I guess, which is kind of unfortunate considering this overhaul is supposed to be making things more consistent. But yeah, that's how I feel anyway in my short amount of time. I would need more experience with it, I feel, as a lot of the rounds I was in, I either survived for a long time or became a zombie, so I couldn't really experience the respawns. So I'd encourage you guys to hear out the other partners' opinions if they upload videos. I know the Devious Melon is going to upload one, shameless plug, but yeah, I think it needs more tweaks, personally. Speaking of mini waves, that moves us into our next topic that we can talk a little bit about, but to be honest, I don't really have too much of an opinion, as I only really notice it happening twice in gameplay, and it only happened to me specifically once. I will say, though, that I do actually really like the concept of it, as it never really seemed to change the tide of battle between the factions too much, but it did keep people playing, and one time it saved me from becoming a zombie again. So, personally, I'm a huge fan of this change, and I would say that it's probably my favorite part of the reinforcement overhaul so far. Now we get to the respawn mechanics for the full waves, and I will say they are interesting. I think they changed it to where instead of both teams only being able to earn 3 respawn waves between themselves, you're now able to earn up to 3 waves separately, as each team had separate point counters, and even after 3 waves were generally earned, it seemed like more points could be gained. In our time of playing, I never saw either side get to 3 waves legitimately, but I will say that it never got to the point where there was no respawns at all, which is good because it meant that none of us got locked out of playing the game, but bad because we never got to see Deadman switch in action, which was apparently in this build. The new team objectives were pretty good, and I did feel like we got properly rewarded for doing our jobs. The only objective I would say is a little bit too much is escaping, specifically the time reduction that you get. There was this funny moment where I, a detained scientist, and one Class D escaped, and literally right after the CI van rolled up, so I can only imagine how much more busted this could be if there was multiple people and they timed their escapes in a big server. There were quite a few things that we unfortunately didn't get to see, as this was a very early staff test. Things like instability and the new win conditions weren't implemented, the spectator UI was still a bit of a work in progress, and like previously mentioned, we didn't get to see Deadman switch due to the conditions for it never being met. So sadly, I can't really comment on or show you any of that stuff. Some extra things to note is that even with the increased spawns from this overhaul, SCPs usually had a pretty alright time on staying alive / winning. Out of 8 games, there was 6 SCP wins, 1 Insurgency win, and 1 Foundation win. Although it should be kept in mind that all the players on the server had like hundreds if not thousands of hours, so things are subject to change with public games, of course. Another thing is that the average time for games lasted between 13 and 15 minutes. The lowest I saw it go to was 12 minutes, and then the highest was 16 minutes. And as a little bonus, since you've probably been seeing the guns refactor at work in the background, I'll mention it real quickly. It feels great. Things felt way punchier with the animations and sound effects, tracers felt very cinematic as SCPs and were useful as humans, and night vision looked good, but it might be a little bit too dark. As for the gameplay itself, it felt pretty good. I didn't really notice too heavily of a change, but it definitely felt better, so I guess it was like kind of a subconscious thing, I'm not sure. Overall, I enjoyed the overhaul quite a bit. It felt like the chance for both teams to spawn was balanced. I thought the mini-waves were a good addition to keep people engaged longer without affecting things too much, and games lasted a good amount of time with good pacing. However, I did have quite a few issues as well in my short amount of time with it. It seems like you can very easily get fucked over with spawns, the situational timer could potentially be very abusable, and it sometimes just felt very random if I'd spawn, when the whole point of this overhaul is to make things more consistent. Anyway, that's all I have to say about this little alpha test we did. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I'll be happy to share more of my thoughts. Like, subscribe, and have a nice day.
Yeah.